Hi, welcome. Now we're looking at Chapter 1, Part 3. This is known as the Neolithic Revolution. Neolithic Revolution, and what was it? Well, basically, around 10,000 years ago, the Earth started warming up and the Ice Age eventually came to an end. So, all that ice, all that water that was frozen and trapped in that ice, it slowly starts melting, right? The sea levels start to rise more than before. That means there's more water running down off of mountains and glaciers, right? Becoming rivers, becoming lakes. We see more water in the water cycle. That means there's more rain, precipitation, uh, falling down on land. So what starts happening is that grasses and crops start growing more abundantly than ever before. And the humans, right, who are, for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, they were hunter gatherers. And now they see all these crops kind of growing on their own. And the women, who of course are the gatherers, start looking at the crops and start realizing, wait a minute, if we throw the seeds into the earth, they'll grow. And we can cultivate this, we can control this, we can control the food supply. So you don't have to travel every day looking for food. You don't have to go hunting. You don't have to move around from point A to point B and so on. You can stay in one place and make the food grow for you. And that's what the Neolithic Revolution was, right? It is the transition from the hunter gatherer humans of the Paleolithic era to the agricultural, the farmer humans of the what we call the Neolithic era, right, or the New Stone Age. So it's a big change. It doesn't happen drastically. It doesn't happen like from one day to the next overnight, uh, but it happens slowly over hundreds and thousands of years, and it happens all over the world at different points in time. So the first place where the idea, the invention of agriculture takes place is the region we call the Fertile Crescent, which is in the eastern Mediterranean, right over here. It includes places like Mesopotamia, Turkey, and Egypt, right? Mesopotamia is what we now call Iraq. And this is the Fertile Crescent, this area, right? Where the temperature and the water supply and everything was just right to make farming possible. And the reason we know that this is the first place is because the oldest houses, like the oldest farming villages that have ever been discovered, right, the artifacts left behind, are from that region right there. Those are the oldest ones. Now, other regions, right, over time, also undergo this transformation of the Neolithic Revolution. So we have a similar process occur here in the Indus Valley of India, then the Huanghe River in China. Right, we also see it happening over here. This is Papua New Guinea, right? Australia would be like right down here, and Papua New Guinea is up here. We also see it happen in Mexico, and in world history we normally refer to this as Mesoamerica, and also in the Andes region of South America, and this is what modern day would be Peru. So the Neolithic revolutions starts in all these different places at different times, right? But the oldest one is over here in the Middle East or in the Fertile Crescent. And over time, we see the spread of these crops, right? Remember, we said humans will interact with each other and trade stuff and exchange ideas. Well, once farming becomes a thing, they start exchanging ways of how to grow crops. They start exchanging seeds and what you can grow and what's the best way and how to fertilize it and so on. So crops like wheat, for example, right, which you make bread out of, that starts over here in Southwest Asia and in the Middle East or in the Fertile Crescent, and it makes its way across to Europe, right? And wheat grows in Europe, across North Africa as well, right? Into the central parts of Europe as well. Rice, right? Rice comes from here, from East Asia, from China, right? And it spreads itself, it goes to Japan, for example. Same thing with corn or maize, right? originates here in Mesoamerica and Mexico, and makes its way north into what is now the United States. So agriculture and agricultural practices spread from one human society or one human tribe to the next, to the next, to the next. Now, does this mean that everyone becomes a farmer? Everyone starts practicing agriculture? No. Some people still remain hunter gatherers, right? They hear about agriculture, they hear about farming, and they're not into it. It doesn't work for them, or the environment that they live in isn't good for hunter gather for farming. So they stick with what they know, which is hunter gathering. Now, with the spread of agriculture around the world, the population starts like growing really, really fast. And we see that there's the reason behind this is that there's more food. Food is more reliable, right? You wake up, you go outside, there's your corn, there's your potato, there's your wheat, your rice, whatever it is, right? And you eat it. And it's there and it's waiting for you and for your family. Instead of having to go hunt and hopefully find an animal, hopefully hit it, hopefully kill it, right? This is more reliable food source. The problem is that it's not more diversified, meaning you're not eating a lot of variety. You're eating the same thing every day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. All right, so if you're in the Andes, you're eating potatoes for breakfast, potatoes for lunch, potatoes for dinner. You throw in different, vegetables and fruits and maybe some meat here and there, but basically it's potatoes 24/7, 365. Now you notice in these pictures you see humans with tools, right? These are different tools that were needed to farm, right? To dig into the earth, to dig seeds in, right? And these are still stone tools, right? Because it's still the Stone Age, right? The Neolithic Stone Age or the New Stone Age. But we see new developments in tools, right? So it's not hunting tools or weapons. Now it's tools to dig into the earth. Now, one thing we also see is the rise of pastoralism. And this kind of becomes the alternative to hunter gatherer or agriculture. So some societies decide that for them, what's best isn't to hunt, isn't to gather, and it isn't to settle down and become farmers, but kind of like an in between, right? A middle way. And that's what we call pastoralism. And basically, their thing is that they raise animals, right? They domesticated different animals, right? You see, going back to this map, right? For example, the cattle, that's cows, right? Domesticated first here, right? Chickens will be here, pigs will be here, horses will be from Central Asia around here, right? The llamas and the alpacas will be down here in South America. So we see pastoralists go about and raising animals, and they move with the animals because the animals move from place to place, eating the food, drinking the water, right? Eating grass or whatever. And that is your food supply. So it is as reliable as farming, but it requires that you move around from point A to point B, okay? Because you're grazing your animals, right? So some people start, growing goats, like you see in this picture, or horses, or cows, pigs, sheep, right? Those are different animals that were domesticated. Right, so you have all these. Here you see a picture of all the different animals that were domesticated from all over the world. Now you will notice the pattern, right? In Afro-Eurasia, right, Africa, Europe, and Asia, right, a lot of animals, a lot of animals. But here in the Americas, not many, right? Literally, the main one is the alpaca or the llama. And this will play a bigger role in world history, and you'll see that soon enough. Now, just like the hunter-gatherers, the pastoralists didn't really weren't able to keep a lot of stuff because again, they're moving with the animals. But they still had a kind of like a division of social status, and that's a process called social stratification, right? That means the society is being divided between upper, middle, lower classes. And basically, the upper classes of these pastoral people would be the people who had the largest herd, right? The most amount of animals, basically. And when you make transactions, you would sell. I'll sell you 50 cows for your sword, or for this, or for that, right? And that was the animals themselves became kind of like a currency, like a money value to it. Now, a pastoralist, because they move from point A to point B and back and forth, right? Many times they will come into interaction and get involved with the agricultural societies. So if you go to town A, and town A is really good at processing, let's say, metal, right? They're learning how to make metal, right? I would exchange my horses or my cows for that metal, because that's a new tool. That's something new and better than the wood or wooden sticks or the stone tools I might use. And I might use it and I might buy it. And then when I go to another town who has no idea about metal, I might show it to them. And little by little, these pastoralists, right, they start kind of becoming like the middle people, like a passageway of technology between different societies. Because remember, those farmers, they're not going to move around much. They're settled down. They're going to stay in the one spot, right, where their village or their farm is. But the pastoralists will help connect them across large areas. Now, whether it's domestication of animals, like we saw with the pastoralists, or the development and improvement of agriculture, over time, right, we see something called surplus. That means extra food, right? And that means that a farmer can now produce enough food to not only feed himself and the family, but there's going to be a surplus. There's going to be an extra amount of food. And then they can use that extra amount of food to trade it for some other goods, like clothing, for example, or tools, or an animal, like a horse or a cow. That also means that there's going to be people in these farming towns and villages who are not going to be farmers. They're going to be something else. And that's what we call the specialization of labor. So essentially, I'm going to say, I don't want to be a farmer because I want to be a carpenter. I'm really good at making furniture. I can make one awesome chair, right? And as long as people want to buy my chairs, I don't have to be a farmer. My job is carpenter. And I'll trade chairs for food and for supplies and for everything else I need. So we start seeing the development of different professions, right? So now there's farmers, which is the main group, but there's also new jobs, new opportunities for different people, right? So we see also the rise of the artisans, right? And that's what a carpenter would be. An artisan would be also like a brewer or a tailor, right, who makes clothing, right? Or someone who makes shoes, or someone who makes tools, right? These are artisans, they're crafts people. They make stuff that's needed or wanted. We also see the development of warriors, like a soldier, right, whose job is to walk around and protect the town, right? Go fight against another town if it's necessary. And their job is to train and fight and get ready for battle. And over time, we start seeing that some people, through either hard work or maybe just luck, start accumulating more wealth than others, right? So we start seeing the division of society, right? Just like we saw with the pastoralists. This is social stratification. So we start seeing upper class, middle class, and lower class. And it's obvious who's who, because who lives where, right? The poor people live in the crappiest little house, and the rich people live in the nicest big house. So that's another big change as well. So textiles, which is clothing, is kind of is one of the main new industries, new professions that you can have. Pottery, right? People who make pots out of clay. This is absolutely important because you can store food and water, right? Because remember, you have so much surplus of grain, surplus of crops, potatoes, corn, wheat, rice, whatever, that you need a place to store it, a place where they won't go bad, a place where it won't rot, right? And that's what you need these pots for, right? Pottery becomes very important as well. And we see the beginnings of metallurgy. Right? Metallurgy is just a fancy word for making stuff out of metal, like tools and weapons and whatnot. And we start seeing that the first steps towards using metal tools and weapons begins in the Neolithic era. So society is getting bigger, populations are getting bigger, these agricultural towns are settling down, they don't have to move around from point A to point B, right? So now instead of having like 50 people in a hunter-gatherer hunting band, right? Now you might have 200 people in a Neolithic village. So how do you keep control? How do you make sure no one steals your stuff or kills you or robs your, steals stuff from your house, right? So we see the need for a government. We see the need for the state, okay? And that's a big term we use quite a bit. Let me go ahead and go to it, right? The state, that's the government, right? The government is going to be responsible for keeping law and order. Within that government, we will also see the rise of organized religion. So people always had religious beliefs, right? We saw it from the Paleolithic era. But now we see kind of like a group saying, these are our beliefs. This is what we in this town, in this city, believe in. And these are our laws based on our religion. Right? And of course, the religion and officials and the government officials, they work together. So we see the expansion, development of both government and society, and religion within Neolithic societies. We also see the birth of patriarchy. And that's going to be one of those terms we're going to use the entire year. Patriarchy is basically means that men have a superior role or higher status than women. And this is a change from the Paleolithic hunter-gatherers who had an equal status between the genders. So with the Neolithic period, we start seeing that these towns, they need to be defended, right? Walls need to be put up in defense so no other army can come in and kill you. You also need irrigation. You need to dig wells so you can get water. You need to dig canals, right? So the water can flow into your fields, right? To grow your crops. You need construction, right? Of, defenses. So who's going to do these works? Who is going to produce this labor? Well, more than likely, it's going to be the men. So in this society, they start saying, you know what? Without the defenses, without the irrigation, without the construction, this town will collapse. In other words, without the hard work of the men, this town will collapse. And therefore, the men should have more of a say than the women. Also, now it doesn't mean that like the women are just sitting around doing nothing. Women are working just as hard. They're farmers, right? They're out in the fields growing crops or taking care of animals, right? They're weaving clothes, right? Textiles. They're taking care of kids. Now, women have always had that role, child bearers, right? They'll take care of the kids. But think about it. The population is rising. That means that the average family is having more and more and more kids. A Paleolithic woman might have 1 or 2 kids in her life, and that's it. A Neolithic woman might have 3, 4, 5, 6 kids. That means there's going to be a longer part of her life dedicated to raising children. And they need all those children because they need those kids to go grow up and work in the fields, work in the agriculture. So women, they go from this equal status to a lower status, and their responsibility, their job, is to stay at home, right? That's what's called the domestic sphere, right? Taking care of the domestic. And this is a big change that occurs in the Neolithic era, right? So here we see kind of the cycle that keeps occurring, right? We see that there's more agricultural productivity, more food, which means more people, which means you got to produce even more. And the more you produce, the more the population grows, and so on, and so on, and so on, and so on, right? And as we mentioned already, the population of the society will be divided between the elites, the nobles, the rich, the upper class, right? And then the lower classes, the commoners, the peasants, right? And many times there's also some type of middle class, right? And who's in what, what job is in what social class, it varies from place to place, right? But if you're educated, you'll probably be up here. If you're a religious official or warrior, you'll probably be up here. If you have a lot of land, you're up here, right? Those are the upper class. Middle class, people who work for the government, people who, like your regular soldier, craftsmen, artisans, right? They're probably going to be in the middle. And the lower class is going to be everyone else. Like large percent of the population, they're going to be farmers, artisans, merchants, right? Now, one of the oldest and most important cities, Neolithic cities, is called Çatalhöyük, right? And this is in what we call Turkey. Back then it was known as Anatolia. And we see these ruins left behind of the houses. And it kind of, based on the artifacts that we see there, we know a little bit more about life in prehistoric societies, right? For one thing, you will notice that there's no streets. So everyone's living on top of everyone. There's no doors, right? The only way to get into the building, into your house, is going upstairs and going through the ceiling. These buildings, these houses, there were no rooms. It was just one big room. That means there was no privacy. The idea of privacy didn't exist. And many times you will live in the same house with people who are not your relatives, right? They're just kind of like your roommates. Here's some more pictures of Çatalhöyük. Another city is important is Jericho. And Jericho is even mentioned in the Bible, and it's in modern day Israel. And the reason it's famous is because it's the oldest city we know of that built walls, right? Again, telling us that the defense, right, and threats against or from other people was a common issue, right? Because if my town, if the crops in my city fail and they don't grow, either I'm going to starve to death or I'm going to go to another town and steal their stuff and kill them if I have to. So you have to build towers and you have to build walls to protect gates, all right, and have soldiers up here guarding everything to make sure that your stuff isn't taken and your people aren't killed. All right, so last thing we're going to mention is disease. Now, diseases have always existed, of course, and humans have always gotten sick and died from disease. But we start seeing in the Neolithic era is diseases become much more common and much worse. And there's two parts of it. There are kind of three parts to it. The first part is animals, right? Because farmers, right, they have their animals. They have their cows, their chickens, their pigs, right, their horse maybe. And those animals, they live in the same house as you do, or right next door. And animals carry diseases that are very harmful to humans. And humans also carry diseases that are harmful to animals. So it's very easy for your cow to get you sick. And then you die because there's no medicine. On top of that, when you have houses like Jericho you see here, or Çatalhöyük that you see here, right, where they're crowded on top of each other. There's no sanitation. There's no sewers. There's no toilets. So that means your waste, your bodily waste, goes into the streets, into the well, right, where people are going to step in and drink it and touch it. And that means that disease can easily spread, right? And again, lack of medicine makes it very high rate of mortality. So because you have a lot of people densely packed together, living close to each other, and you have no sanitation, and you have animals with their diseases, you're going to see whole towns wiped off because of disease. They die, right? And diseases, of course, did happen with the Paleolithic people. They got sick too, but it wasn't nowhere near as frequent as we see here with the Neolithic people. All right, so that's part 3 of chapter 1. We'll see you back for the last part in another video.